There is something a self-obsessed person will never tell you. Something they will spend their whole life hiding behind charm, behind rage, behind silence, behind tears that only appear when it is convenient. And here it is. They are not afraid of your anger. They are not afraid of your tears. They are not afraid of your threats to walk away. They have heard all of that over and over before. What genuinely shakes them, what breaks the very foundation of the dark structure sitting inside their mind, is the second you stop reacting, the second you see them clearly, the second your eyes stop pleading and start watching, because in that instant, something they have leaned on for years begins to fall apart, the illusion cracks wide open, and whatever pattern of manipulation, control, and quiet psychological domination has been feeding on you suddenly realizes it is staring at someone it cannot consume any longer. That is when this kind of person begins to behave in strange but very predictable ways. And if you learn to spot those ways, you will understand something most people never figure out. They were never powerful in the first place. You were. They just made sure you never realized it. Most people never understand that these individuals do not run on love, logic, or even hate. They run on control. Control is their oxygen. Control is the only thing that briefly silences the unbearable emptiness living inside them. And the way they lock in that control is by studying you. They study your fears, your hopes, your wounds, your loneliness, your need to be understood. Then they place themselves as the answer to everything you have ever been missing. That is why the relationship felt almost magical at the start. It was not love, it was quiet reconnaissance. They were mapping your inner world so they could later use it like a weapon against you. And the moment you begin to heal, the moment you begin to know yourself, that map becomes useless. Their influence begins to fade away. And that is exactly when their behavior starts to shift in directions that feel almost unreal. Pay close attention because this changes everything. When this kind of person senses that their psychological grip is weakening, they do not respond with reflection. They respond with panic wearing the mask of dominance. They suddenly become colder or suddenly become sweeter. They withdraw with no explanation at all. Or they flood you with attention you never even asked for. They start fights out of nowhere. They bring up wounds from years ago. They accuse you of things you never did. They rewrite history right in front of your face, waiting for you to flinch, waiting for you to doubt yourself, waiting for you to shrink back into the small shape they carved out for you. And when you do not, when you stand firm, when your eyes stay calm, something inside them begins to unwind. Because their entire identity depends on your reaction. Without your reaction, they do not know who they even are. This is the part nobody ever talks about. They are not a strong person pretending to be weak. They are a deeply frightened person pretending to be a god. Underneath all the arrogance, the cruelty, the cold disconnection, there is a child who never learned how to feel safe inside their own skin. That is why they need to dominate. That is why they need to humiliate. That is why they need to be admired, feared, obeyed, and never questioned. And when someone like you, someone who has done the deep inner work, someone who has started to value themselves, walks into their life and refuses to bow, they experience something close to existential terror. Because for the first time, they are forced to feel the very thing they have spent their entire life avoiding. Their own emptiness, their own smallness, their own hidden shame. And what happens next reveals the full truth. Stay with me here. The first sign that they are losing their grip on you is sudden, irrational rage. Not anger, that makes sense. Rage that explodes out of nowhere. Rage that is wildly out of proportion. Rage that often targets something tiny. A tone of voice, a delayed reply, a boundary you set kindly, a moment when you did not laugh at their joke. That rage is not really about what you did. That rage is about what you did not give them. You did not give them fear. You did not give them submission. You did not give them the emotional supply they were used to pulling out of you. So they escalate because in their distorted mind, if charm no longer works, then intimidation must. And if intimidation does not work either, then destruction will follow. The second sign is sudden withdrawal. The silent treatment, the cold shoulder, the disappearance, the empty stare across the room. To an untrained eye, this looks like indifference. But what is actually happening inside them is the exact opposite of calm. They are punishing you. They are trying to make you feel invisible, abandoned, desperate. They are testing whether the old wound inside you, the wound of not feeling loved, not feeling chosen, not feeling enough, is still strong enough to drag you back to them on your knees. And if you stay grounded, if you do not chase, if you do not break the silence first, you have just done something they cannot stand. You have shown them that their absence does not destroy you. And that leaves a wound in their ego they will carry for a very long time. But here is where it gets even darker. The third sign is blame shifting that becomes almost theatrical. Suddenly, every problem in the relationship is your fault. Every cruel word that came out of their mouth happened because you provoked it. Every lie they told was your fault because you did not trust them enough. Every act of betrayal happened because you did not love them the right way. This is not an argument. This is a quiet psychological operation. They are trying to reinstall the original software of guilt, shame, and self-doubt back into your mind. Because without that software running quietly in the background, you are unreachable. You are unbreakable. You are free. And freedom inside someone they used to control is the one thing they cannot allow to exist in peace. The fourth sign is the smear campaign. When all internal manipulation fails, they turn outward. They begin talking about you to friends, family, co-workers, sometimes even to your own children. They paint you as crazy, unstable, cold, selfish, ungrateful. They flip the story so smoothly that even people who have known you for years begin to look at you with confusion. And here is what most victims never understand. The smear campaign is not an attack on your reputation. It is an attempt to rebuild the cage. Because if they can convince the world that you are the problem, then maybe, just maybe, they can convince you again as well. The smear campaign is the desperate roar of a predator that has lost its prey. Nothing more. Nothing less. Watch what happens next, because this is where things begin to shift. What most people never realize is that emotional independence is the single most threatening force in their life. Not money, not status, not even leaving. Emotional independence. The moment you stop needing their approval, their validation, their attention, their permission to feel okay about yourself, you have effectively cut the cord they were feeding through. And a self-obsessed person without a source of supply is a deeply unstable person. That is why they become more aggressive, not less, when you begin to heal. Because in their mind, your healing is their starvation. Your peace is their famine. Your self-respect is their exile. They do not want you well. They want you dependent. They want you reactive. The healthier you become, the more dangerous you become to the version of you they once built in their mind. Pay close attention because this changes everything. Boundaries are not walls. Boundaries are mirrors, and they cannot tolerate mirrors. Every time you set a boundary, no matter how gentle, you are forcing them to see themselves. You are forcing them to face the truth that you have a self, a soul, a center that exists outside of them and is not theirs to command. That is unbearable for them because in their internal world, you do not exist as a separate person. You exist as a function of supply, a function of admiration, a function of emotional regulation, and when that function suddenly says no, when that function starts living a life of its own, they feel something close to betrayal on a massive scale. That is why they react to boundaries the way most people react to aggression. Because to them, a boundary feels like aggression itself. Your no becomes the destruction of their entire universe, the entire structure they have quietly leaned on for years. This is the part nobody talks about. Underneath every cruel behavior, underneath every insult, every silent treatment, every guilt trip, every lie, every smear campaign, every outburst of rage, there is one single emotion: fear. They are afraid, always. Constantly underneath the mask, they live in a state of never-ending psychological dread. Dread of being exposed, dread of being truly seen, dread of being ordinary, dread of being abandoned, dread of realizing that the self they have built up is hollow. And because that fear never fully leaves them, they spend their lives building walls against it. Some use arrogance, some use charm, some use intimidation, some use victimhood, some use success, some use relationships. But every strategy serves the same hidden purpose: to prevent anyone, including themselves, from looking too closely behind the mask. That is why your clarity is so threatening to them. That is why your healing is so disruptive. That is why your emotional independence feels so dangerous in their eyes. Because when you stop playing the role they handed you, you become living evidence that their illusion is failing. You become proof that their control was never absolute. You become proof that their version of reality can be challenged. And that is something they truly struggle to tolerate. The greatest mistake people make is believing that defeating them requires winning arguments, exposing lies, or forcing accountability. It does not. The moment you stop seeking validation from them, the game changes. The moment you stop explaining yourself endlessly, the game changes again. The moment you stop defending your reality to someone who is committed to twisting it, the game changes once more. Because your power was never in convincing them. Your power was always in reclaiming yourself. And once that happens, something remarkable quietly occurs. The manipulations begin to lose their force. The guilt loses its grip on you. The confusion begins to clear from your mind. The emotional hooks stop sinking as deeply. You begin to see patterns where you once saw mysteries. You begin to see tactics where you once saw emotions. You begin to see control where you once saw love. And while that realization can be painful at first, it is also deeply freeing in the long run. Because clarity breaks cycles. Awareness breaks deep conditioning. Understanding breaks generational chains. They may continue trying. They may return with charm. They may return with promises. They may return with apologies. They may return with accusations. They may return with stories designed to pull you back into the old pattern. But once you truly see the pattern clearly, it becomes much harder to unsee it. And that is what frightens them the most. Not your anger, not your sadness, not even your departure. What frightens them most is your quiet awakening. Because an awakened person is no longer easy to manipulate. An awakened person no longer mistakes control for love. An awakened person no longer hands over their identity in exchange for approval. And when that transformation happens, they are forced to face a reality they have spent their whole life avoiding. The reality that the power they seem to possess was never really theirs. It came from the attention you gave, the fear you carried, the doubt you accepted, the reactions you provided. And once those things are gone, the illusion begins to fade away. What remains is not a powerful figure controlling the room. What remains is a deeply insecure person standing face to face with the very emptiness they worked so hard to escape. And that is exactly why the moment you stop reacting is the moment everything truly changes. And the only way they know how to manage that inner dread is to push it outward onto someone else, to make another person carry it on their behalf for years. That someone was you. And the reason your healing frightens them so much is because the moment you set down the fear they handed you, they are left with no choice but to face it themselves. And they would rather tear you down than sit quietly with it. And what happens next reveals the entire truth. Once you understand this, you begin to see every behavior of theirs through a completely different lens. The rage is not strength. It is panic dressed up. The silence is not power. It is punishment born quietly from fear. The blame shifting is not confidence. It is a desperate attempt to keep the mask fixed firmly to their face. The smear campaign is not influence. It is the loud sound of someone truly losing control. Suddenly, the giant you once feared begins to look exactly like what they always were. A frightened person screaming from inside a heavy costume. And once you see that image clearly, you cannot unsee it. And once you cannot unsee it, you can no longer be controlled by it. But this is where it becomes even darker. Their deepest fear is not you leaving. It is you becoming someone they can no longer recognize. Because the version of you they once pretended to love was the version that needed them, the version that constantly doubted itself, the version that apologized too quickly, the version that gave too much of itself, the version that forgave too easily, the version that stayed too long. When you become someone who knows their value, someone who walks calmly, speaks clearly, sets boundaries without guilt, and chooses peace over chaos, that person becomes a complete stranger to them. And strangers cannot be manipulated through old wounds because old wounds belong to old versions of you that no longer exist. The new you has quietly rewritten the rules, and they cannot understand the new language you are speaking. This is exactly why healing is the greatest threat to them. Not revenge, not exposure, not even abandonment. Healing. Because revenge can be twisted into a story about your cruelty. Exposure can be reframed as your bitterness. Abandonment can be rewritten as their freedom from you. But healing cannot be touched. Healing cannot be spun. Healing cannot be argued with. A healed person is a sealed door. A healed person does not engage, does not chase, does not beg, does not explain, does not perform for anyone. A healed person simply lives their life. And in that quiet living, they watch someone who cannot have and cannot become the very thing they lost. And nothing haunts them more than watching the person they tried to destroy walk into a life of peace that they themselves are completely incapable of creating. Pay close attention because this truly changes everything. Self-respect is the quietest and most devastating force you will ever possess in your life. Not loud self-respect, quiet, internal self-respect. The kind that does not need to be announced to anyone. The kind that simply refuses to bend. When you respect yourself fully, manipulation has no surface to grip onto. Guilt trips slide off you like rain off glass. Gaslighting does not even enter your mind because you trust your own perception more than their twisted version of reality. Flattery does not move you because your self-worth does not need to be borrowed from another person's words. Threats do not shake you because you have already lost the fear of losing what was hurting you in the first place. Self-respect makes you unreachable in all the small places they once walked so freely. And here is what no one ever told you growing up. You were not weak for being manipulated by them. You were open. You were trusting. You were loving in a world that taught you to expect love in return. They did not target you because you were broken. They targeted you because you were bright, because you carried something they could never make on their own. Warmth, depth, empathy, loyalty, a soul that could truly feel. They came to you not to give, but only to take, because they could not create what you already were deep inside. And the day you understand that fully, the day you stop seeing yourself as the victim of their cleverness and start seeing yourself as the source of light they were trying to steal, something inside you changes permanently. You stop grieving the relationship. You begin grieving the wasted years. And then slowly, you stop grieving altogether. Because you realize you were never the one who lost anything. You were the one who survived everything. So when you see them suddenly raging at absolutely nothing, suddenly withdrawing into cold silence, suddenly rewriting every past story to make you the villain, suddenly running to others to paint you as unstable, suddenly love-bombing you out of nowhere after weeks of cruelty, do not see chaos. See confession. See an entire psychological structure breaking apart right in front of your eyes. See the truth that they are afraid of you without saying it. Afraid of the version of you that finally woke up. Afraid of the version of you that finally stopped flinching at their words. That version of you is not someone they can manipulate. That version of you is someone they have to flee from quietly. And the moment they finally do, you will know, perhaps for the first time in many long years, that the power was never really theirs. It was always yours. They simply rented it from you under completely false pretenses. And the lease has finally expired. You do not need to confront them. You do not need to expose them. You do not need to win an argument against them. They will never let you win one anyway. You only need to keep healing, keep growing as a person, keep standing firm in the quiet, unshakable truth of who you are becoming, because every single day you choose yourself. Every single day you honor your own peace. Every single day you refuse to shrink back down. You are doing something far more powerful than any revenge could ever possibly achieve. You are becoming the one thing they can never, ever be: free, truly free, deeply free, soulfully free within yourself. And that is the quiet victory that changes everything for good.